All right, let's dive right into this explainer. I want you to picture something with me for a second. A visually striking Levantine Bedouin biopunk world. We're talking silver olive trees glowing with this soft neon light against a massive starlit desert sky. Pretty cool, right? Welcome to Episode 2, The Nomadic Assembly, the Blessing of Wisdom and Peace. Today, we're basically setting up camp around the glowing embers of a futuristic desert campfire, because we are going to rethink, well, pretty much everything we thought we knew about history, wisdom, and survival.
So here's a massive what-if for you. What if the single most famous figure in all of human history, Jesus, was actually best understood not as some urban theologian, but as a Bedouin nomad? Think about it. For centuries, our whole understanding of the historical Jesus has been heavily filtered through this highly complex, urbanized, Hellenistic lens. But what actually happens when we strip all of that away? What if we place him right back into the harsh, clarifying sands of the Levantine desert among the ancient Arab tribes? Well, let's find out.
Moving into Part 1, The Nomadic Assembly. Okay, so this comparison perfectly illustrates the massive cultural gap we have to cross here. We normally project these modern, urban assumptions onto our history, things like complex theology, rigid hierarchies, highly institutionalized religion. But the actual nomadic reality? It's literally a whole different world. We're talking direct experiential faith, pure asceticism, and incredibly fluid wilderness survival. To actually understand this ancient wisdom, we basically have to stop looking at it from the comfy perspective of an empire's capital city and start looking at it from the gritty perspective of a desert wanderer. To really get into that headspace, let's frame our entire explainer today as a hikayah. Now, a hikayah isn't just your standard bedtime story, it's a traditional Bedouin campfire story, or sometimes a riddle, specifically used to pass down really deep, profound wisdom. But, and here's the catch, it's only meant for those who are perceptive enough to actually grasp the true meaning. So pull up a seat around the glowing embers of our Shabbat al-Nar, our fire gathering, and let's see if we can decode this hikayah together.
Which brings us to Part 2, the desert classroom.
Now, I'm sure you've likely heard this famous quote before. Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. But I want you to read it again, this time entirely through the lens of a nomad. Suddenly, it perfectly encapsulates the life of an itinerant traveler. It's not just a sad lament about poverty, it's actually a declaration of independence. It's the ultimate description of a true son of the road, a resilient, ascetic youth who relies totally on the open desert and the hospitality of strangers rather than the artificial, walled-in security of a city.
So you might be wondering, how exactly does someone gain such incredible psychological insight out there in such a harsh environment? Well, according to our sources, the desert provides what's called tazkiyah, a profound purification and development of the self. Out there in the open wilderness, miles away from the corruption and noise of complex urban living, a person develops serious, deep empathy and responsibility. They foster this thing called a Barzakian consciousness. It's such a fascinating concept. It's basically the perfect balance between acute, grounded physical survival and this soaring, incredibly deep spiritual presence. You're not just, meditating in a cave. You are actively surviving in the wild while staying entirely connected to the divine.
And here's a really crucial point. Tending sheep is not just some menial job out there. In nomadic culture, shepherding is literally the ultimate training ground for great leadership. It builds tranquility, immense patience, and a very specific type of empathy that's required to care for a flock that literally cannot speak its needs. It's no coincidence that basically every great prophet of the desert was a shepherd first.
All right, Part 3, Protocols of Hospitality.
So, we need to translate a really vital ancient cultural concept so we can surely understand the dynamics of desert life. Meet al-Mutazib. This translates to the ultimate host in Bedouin culture. This is the person who honors their guests by providing absolute provision, fierce protection, and true delight. In the harsh desert, where nature is completely unforgiving, finding a host is literally everything. It's life or death.
And there are these ancient, unspoken protocols of desert hospitality that go along with this. First off, you welcome the traveler immediately, no interrogating them about who they are or where they're heading. Second, you wash the dust of the road from their feet, which is a sign of supreme, humbling honor. And third, you serve them. Ideally, you do this by slaughtering a fat camel, or a hashi, to provide ultimate delight and nourishment. Now, these exact protocols form the absolute foundation of Jesus' itinerant ministry, as he traveled from tent to tent, relying completely on the generosity of strangers.
And that brings us right to this really powerful instruction he gave his disciples. Do not carry a purse, or a bag, or sandals. Now look, through a modern urban lens, that just sounds like an extreme vow of poverty, right? But through a Bedouin lens, it's a whole different ballgame. It is about absolute, radical trust in God as the ultimate al-Muwazib. It's about walking straight into the harsh wilderness with the absolute certainty that the divine host is going to provide the ultimate hospitality.
Moving right along to Part 4, Decoding Desert Parables.
You know, true wisdom in the desert is never just handed out for free on a silver platter, especially to those who won't value it. Bedouin riddles are short, they're sharp, and they are specifically designed to test the intellect and the character of the listener. And Jesus, he used parables in the exact same way. It was this brilliant, culturally resonant method used to separate the genuinely curious seekers of truth from the arrogant, overly intellectual urban debaters who really just wanted to argue.
Okay, here's perhaps the most famous enigma of them all. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. People have spent literally centuries trying to overcomplicate this phrase, but the truth is, it really only makes sense through a direct desert lens.
Just think about the sheer visual contrast here for a second. The camel is the ultimate symbol of desert bulk, massive weight, and survival. It's literally the biggest thing a nomad interacts with on a daily basis. Now compare that to the eye of the needle. That is the absolute smallest opening known to a nomad, used to mend the very tents they sleep in. The stark, honestly almost humorous visual contrast between these two extreme physical realities is exactly what makes the riddle so incredibly memorable to a nomadic audience. It is an absolute masterpiece of desert logic.
Let's look at another one. Be as wise as serpents. Now, to a modern city dweller, comparing someone to a snake sounds, well, sinister, right? Untrustworthy, deceitful. But let's look at the nomadic logic behind this one.
See, Bedouin logic naturally isolates the core attribute of an animal. Out there in the shifting dunes, the serpent represents phenomenal, quick-witted survival. It's all about hyper-awareness and adaptability in a totally hostile environment. It absolutely does not represent venom or deceit in this specific context. The advice here is actually to be deeply perceptive, to be resilient, and to read your environment instantly. It's the ultimate survival skill.
Now let's take a look at the famous story of the prodigal son, but let's retell it as a Bedouin salfa, or story. When the completely disgraced son finally returns home, the father doesn't scold him. He doesn't demand an accounting of all the wasted money. Instead, he displays ultimate Bedouin magnanimity, just true noble grace. He immediately gives the boy a bisht, which is a cloak of immense honor. He hands him the ring, a powerful symbol of tribal sovereignty and belonging, and to top it all off, he orders the slaughter of the hashi, the fat camel, to celebrate. Viewing this through a nomadic lens reveals its breathtaking cultural power. God is framed as the ultimate magnanimous Bedouin patriarch, completely restoring honor to the lost.
Finally, we arrive at Part 5, the blessing of peace. Consider this concept of Ria Aha, the Good Shepherd. In the safety and comfort of a walled city, a shepherd might just be seen as a humble profession. But out in desert culture, the Ria Aha is a profound symbol of sacrifice. This is the person who willingly sleeps in the freezing cold and physically faces down the wolf just to protect the flock. This completely redefines the whole idea of spiritual leadership. It is no longer a title of power, prestige, or getting the fanciest seat in a temple. It is a role of immense, gritty, literal life-on-the-line sacrifice.
So picture this, a broad-shouldered, incredibly strong aesthetic youth. He's sitting in perfect stillness by the glowing embers of the desert night fire, just fully, completely embodying peace. This nomadic lifestyle, the open air, the radical reliance on God, the deep connection to raw nature, it purifies the consciousness. It effectively strips away the ego and leaves behind a transparent soul, one that is entirely capable of capturing and reflecting divine light. And honestly, that is the true blessing of wisdom and peace.
As we sit here by these biopunk embers, I want to leave you with one final, provocative question. If we strip away all those centuries of complex, institutional, urban theology, how does viewing this ancient wisdom directly through the lens of the desert campfire fundamentally change your understanding of history? When you see the source material not as stuffy city doctrine, but as raw, nomadic survival, literally everything shifts. I really hope this explainer has sparked your curiosity to look at the past with fresh, desert-adjusted eyes. Thank you so much for gathering around the fire with us today.